Give me a few minutes of your time, and I will strip away what you've been told is weakness. Not by flooding you with cheesy motivation or hollow positivity, but by helping you see that what you've called weakness all your life was never real. It's been an illusion, a story repeated so many times you've confused it with your identity, a pattern passed down by people who were themselves afraid of standing tall. And if you're willing to hear this fully, if you can sit through the uneasy truths and let these words reach the quiet places inside you, then something deep within you will break. But what grows back won't be a better you. It will be the truest you, the one that has always existed underneath the doubts and the layers of softness you were taught to put on for safety. The part of you that was waiting for one moment, the moment you finally stopped defending your weakness and started reclaiming your power. Let's be absolutely clear. This isn't about fixing you. It's about waking up what you've kept asleep for too long, because you were never born to live small, muted, or apologetic. You were born to stand firm in your own presence. And right now, we're going to remember what that feels like. Understand this first. The world never wanted you strong. Schools praised your silence because quiet kids are easier to control. Parents loved your obedience because it made their lives simpler. Friends felt safer when you were predictable because it meant you wouldn't disrupt the comfort of the group. And every time you raised your head, every time you asked why things were the way they were, they called it rude. When you tried to speak up, they labeled you difficult, ungrateful, dramatic. When you started to show even a hint of power, they were quick to slap you with the word arrogant, as if confidence was something shameful. So you learned to file down your edges, to keep your voice soft enough that it wouldn't ripple the calm. You learned to water down your opinions so they wouldn't upset anyone. They taught you that preserving peace, no matter how fake, was more important than protecting your truth. But peace without truth isn't peace at all. It's quiet surrender, a slow sacrifice of your own self just to keep others comfortable. They never told you what that kind of peace would cost. They never warned you that each time you stayed silent when your soul screamed to speak, each time you agreed to something you despised, each time you laughed off what cut you inside, you weren't just keeping the peace. You were tearing little pieces of yourself away. You were teaching your mind and body that what you really felt didn't matter, that it was better to go along than to stand firm. And after enough of those moments, you started to believe it. You started to think that the shrinking was who you were, that caution was your nature, that swallowing your words was your personality. They never told you that what you thought was maturity was actually fear in a more acceptable disguise. But what does it really mean to be weak? People throw that word around like it's obvious, like it's just about tears or sensitivity. They see someone cry and whisper that they're weak. They see someone hesitate and assume they're fragile. But weakness isn't about emotion. It never was. Weakness is what happens when you give away your power so completely that you forget it was ever yours to begin with. It's when you need someone else's permission before you let yourself take a single step. It's when your gut churns, screaming no, but your lips still say yes because you fear the fallout. It's when you pretend you don't care, just to dodge someone's judgment, lying to yourself and everyone else to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. It's when your truth is locked behind a smile you don't mean, a calm voice you don't feel, and an agreement you hate. Weakness is not the absence of strength. It's not about how loud you cry or how sensitive your heart is. Weakness is betrayal of yourself. It's the slow, daily process of abandoning what you know is right for what's easy or what's expected, until turning your back on yourself feels normal, until self-betrayal starts to look like kindness, until the habit of dimming your light becomes so familiar You start to think it's who you were born to be. And every time you repeat that pattern, you dig yourself deeper into a life that doesn't feel like yours, surrounded by people who only love the version of you that's easy to swallow. But that version of you, the one who lives in fear of ruffling feathers, isn't the real you. The real you is the part that remembers what it felt like to dream without limits. The part that got angry when something wasn't fair. The part that wanted to dance in your own rhythm even if others stared. The real you wasn't born to whisper, to tiptoe, or to nod along when your soul ached to rebel. The real you was born to stand in your own skin without apology. And deep down, even if you've buried it under years of silence, you know it's true. Because every time you swallow your words, every time you keep the peace at the cost of your spirit, something in you stirs. Something that refuses to die quietly. Something that knows peace built on lies will never feel like home. And here's the brutal truth that no one likes to say out loud. You were trained to be weak, not just by one person or a single moment, but by 1,000 little lessons stacked on top of each other until weakness felt like second nature. You were taught that silence is polite, that speaking up is trouble, that swallowing your feelings is maturity, that if you kept your voice low, your opinion soft, your presence small, you'd be loved and accepted. You were taught that disappearing into the background was not just wise, but necessary. Because a person who fades is a person who doesn't challenge anyone's comfort. And they called it kindness, but it wasn't kindness. They praised you for being nice because nice people don't make waves. Nice people don't question. Nice people are easier to manage, easier to control, easier to forget. Every time you tucked your truth behind a fake smile, every time you nodded along to something you didn't believe, every time you chose approval over authenticity, you got a little more applause, a little more praise. And it felt good, didn't it? Because you learned that approval is everything, that acceptance is survival. But there's a cost to that comfort, a silent price you've been paying every day. When your life is built on the need to be accepted, you will betray yourself again and again. You'll mold yourself into whatever shape gets the nod of approval. You'll hide the parts of you that might scare someone away. You'll agree with things that make your stomach twist. You'll become a mirror for other people's expectations instead of a reflection of your own truth. But strength begins with seeing the lie for what it is. Weakness has been sold to you as goodness, packaged neatly with words like selflessness, humility, and patience. But not the real kind. The kind of selflessness that demands you ignore your own needs. The kind of humility that tells you to downplay every win. The kind of patience that expects you to tolerate disrespect. They convinced you that saying no is mean, that putting yourself first is selfish, that protecting your boundaries is cold-hearted. And every time you believed it, you gave up another piece of your power. But here's what they don't want you to know. The people who truly love you will handle your honesty. They will welcome the real you. The ones who can't? They were never on your side. They loved your compliance, not your character. So what happens when you stop trading your truth for approval? When you stand in your own words without softening them? That's where strength lives. That's when you start remembering who you were before you were told who you should be. And if you're brave enough to look past the need to be liked, you'll find a self you've barely let breathe. Who are you when you don't need to be liked? Who are you when you don't dilute your words, your dreams, your wants? Most people don't have an answer, not because they're shallow, but because they've spent years constructing themselves around other people's reactions. They don't know who they are. They only know who they're supposed to be in every room, every relationship, every conversation. They know the face they wear to keep the peace, not the soul hidden underneath. That's why so many people walk around with a quiet anger they can't explain. Why they feel a restlessness in the pit of their stomach that no amount of distraction or entertainment can soothe. It's why they lie awake replaying conversations, regretting the words they didn't say, the boundaries they didn't set, the moments they let pass without showing up fully. Because living as a watered-down version of yourself is exhausting. Every day you perform instead of live. Every day you swallow feelings you were meant to express. Every day you laugh at things that hurt, bite your tongue to keep the mood light, hide your passion so you don't seem too much. And in those moments, you chip away at your own spirit. You've felt it, haven't you? That tightness in your chest when you want to speak, but don't. The hollow ache when you realize you've said yes to something you hate. The sharp sting of resentment when you hear yourself apologizing for simply existing, for needing, for feeling. It's not weakness to feel these things. It's weakness to pretend you don't. Because every time you deny your truth to stay agreeable, you drift further from the life that could actually fulfill you. And you know, deep down, that peace built on dishonesty is a prison with velvet walls, soft enough to lull you, but strong enough to keep you trapped. You weren't born weak. You weren't born to doubt your own voice or hesitate every time your heart told you to move. You came into this world fierce, with instincts sharp enough to sense danger and courage strong enough to claim what mattered. You were born with a will that could shape your own direction, a spark of clarity that knew exactly what felt right and what didn't. But over the years, piece by piece, you were taught to bury that fire so you could blend in, so you wouldn't stand out, so you'd be easier to like, easier to manage. And every time you hid what was burning inside you, you lost a piece of yourself. Not because you wanted to, but because you thought you had to. You thought being accepted required you to become smaller, quieter, safer. But that fire never died. It's still there, waiting. And the first step to bringing it back is to see where weakness has been hiding. Because weakness isn't always loud. It sneaks into your smallest habits, your quiet routines, the unnoticed choices you make every morning. When you open your eyes, and the first thing you do is grab your phone, you're letting the outside world set the tone for your day. You're giving every notification, every headline, every shiny piece of gossip the power to tell you what matters, what's scary, what you should envy. Without realizing it, you're saying, I don't trust myself to guide me. Tell me who I am. And each time you do that, you loosen your grip on your own mind just a little bit more. You start your day reacting instead of creating. That's how weakness grows. Quietly, predictably, invisibly. So break that pattern. The moment you wake up, don't reach for your phone. Reach for your breath. Remind yourself, even if you have to whisper it, you are not here to scroll, to compare, to absorb other people's noise. You are here to build something real, to carve your own path, to decide what deserves your attention. Let your breath steady you before the world tries to shake you. Remember, the first moments of your day are like wet cement. Whatever you press into them will set the shape of your mindset. Choose to press strength, not surrender. Weakness doesn't just live in what you do, but in what you say. Words aren't harmless. Every time you casually throw out, I don't know, when you actually do, you teach yourself to doubt your own knowledge. You train your mind to stay small, to second guess instead of stand firm. Every time you say sorry for things that don't need an apology, like taking up space, sharing an idea, or simply existing, you tell yourself you're a burden. You program yourself to feel guilty for breathing. Over time, Those tiny words pile up and build a cage around your confidence. And that cage becomes the quiet prison you carry everywhere. So start speaking with intention. Say what you mean without diluting it for people who benefit from your uncertainty. Speak clearly, directly, without unnecessary apologies or nervous qualifiers. Let your words carry the weight of someone who knows they have every right to their own perspective, because they do. You do. When you own your words, you remind yourself and everyone around you that you're not here to be invisible. You're here to live unapologetically. That is how you start digging your fire out from under the ashes of fear and routine. That is how you reclaim the power that was always yours. Now let's talk about emotion, because this is where so many people get it twisted. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that strength is the same thing as numbness. That if you're really tough, nothing should touch you. You shouldn't feel sadness, shouldn't show anger, shouldn't let yourself get too happy. You were told that if you cry, you're weak. If you get angry, you're dangerous. If you celebrate too loudly, you're arrogant. And so you started to believe that strength meant staying stone-faced through it all, burying every feeling until you couldn't tell what was real inside you anymore. But strength isn't about killing your emotions. It's about mastering them. It's feeling the full force of what you feel and still choosing your response. That's the real power, being able to stand in the middle of your own storm without letting it sweep you away. Because when someone disrespects you, your first impulse might be to explode, to lash out, to defend yourself in a rush of words and anger. Or maybe your instinct is to chase their approval, to prove them wrong so they'll change their mind about you. But both of those reactions give away your power. They show your hand. They make you easy to predict, easy to manipulate. Instead, strength is found in stillness. When you sit back and watch without needing to react right away, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability makes you unshakable. Because when no one can guess how you'll respond, they lose their hold over you. You get to decide what's worth your energy, what deserves your voice, what earns your movement. And every decision you make from that place of calm, steady power reinforces the truth that you are the one in control. Not your emotions, not their opinions. That same principle applies when you look at your past. Too many people treat their history like a permanent cage, using old wounds as the reason they can't move forward. They carry stories of betrayal, heartbreak, or failure like a shield against growth. But here's the thing. Everyone has pain. Everyone has scars. Everyone has moments that could have broken them completely. Your story is only a tragedy if you decide to let it stop you from becoming more. The world isn't waiting to hear your list of hardships. It's watching to see who you become in spite of them. Your past doesn't have to be your excuse. It can be your forge. It can be the place where your fire was tempered, your edges were sharpened, your resolve was born. The truth is, no one is coming to turn your pain into strength for you. No one can walk into your memories and rewrite what happened. Only you can do that. Only you can stand in front of what hurt you and decide that it will not define you, that it will not set the ceiling for your life. Will you let what happened to you be the reason you stay small, bitter, or afraid? Or will you use every bit of that pain as fuel to build the life you've always wanted? Because there's a difference between carrying your scars and wearing them like chains. One makes you wiser, the other keeps you stuck. And every day, you get to choose which one it will be. Most people drift through their days like leaves caught in a slow-moving current, waiting for purpose to arrive, as if it were a knock at the door. They think one day they'll stumble into something so big, so obvious, it'll snap them awake and show them exactly who they're meant to be. But purpose doesn't work like that. It doesn't show up uninvited, wrapped in certainty. It grows where you decide to plant it. It starts the moment you stop asking what you're supposed to do and start declaring what you stand for. Because the truth is, you don't find purpose, you choose it. You carve it out of the raw material of your life, shape it with your decisions, and feed it with every moment you refuse to let fear or doubt lead you. And when you make that choice, when you say, "This is what I will protect, this is the line I will not cross, this is the person I refuse to abandon," something powerful happens inside you. Weakness starts to die. Because purpose sharpens your focus. It kills the distractions that once pulled you in 100 directions. It makes the small things feel small, the noise feel irrelevant. Suddenly, the opinions that once kept you up at night lose their grip, and the fears that used to paralyze you shrink under the weight of your own clarity. Purpose gives you direction, and direction is stronger than any doubt. When you know what you're building, you don't have time to flinch at every shadow. This is what you've been avoiding. Not because you're lazy or broken, but because you've been told your whole life that you're supposed to wait for permission to live boldly. That if you speak up, you'll upset someone. That if you take up space, you'll threaten someone's comfort. But the truth you've been avoiding is that you were never weak. You were made to feel weak. You were shaped to believe that playing small was noble, that staying quiet was wise, that minimizing yourself was love. You were taught to apologize for your dreams, to laugh off your instincts, to settle for what felt safe instead of what felt true. But you don't have to accept that story anymore. You don't have to keep carrying the weight of expectations that were never yours. You can stand up now, taller than you've ever let yourself before. You can let your voice carry the full force of your convictions. You can walk away from anyone, anything, or any place that demands you shrink to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. Because this isn't about reinventing yourself or pretending to be someone new. It's about returning to the you that existed before you learned to hide. The you that felt joy without needing permission. The you that got angry at injustice without swallowing it down. The you that dreamed without worrying about who would approve. That real you isn't broken. That real you doesn't need to be fixed. The real you has just been buried under layers of doubt, fear, and the need to fit in. But buried things can be unearthed. And when you dig deep enough to bring that version of you back to light, you'll remember what it feels like to stand in your own presence, unapologetic, unshakable, and fully alive. If you're still here, listening to these words instead of clicking away for the next easy distraction, it means something important. You're done mistaking softness for safety. You're done telling yourself that shrinking is the same thing as surviving. It means you're ready to stand alone if you have to choose the harder path if it means living honestly. Because you've started to realize that belonging should never cost you your truth. It should never ask you to bury what matters most inside you just to earn a place at someone else's table. And maybe you've been wondering why you keep stalling on the things you care about most. Why you procrastinate on your own potential. Why you talk yourself out of every step forward. The answer isn't laziness or a lack of talent. The answer is fear. The quiet, hidden kind of fear that comes from trying to stay small for the comfort of people who don't want you to outgrow them. The truth is, some people would rather see you average than alive, because your growth threatens their comfort. And if you're still trying to keep them comfortable, you'll keep playing small. But you don't have to pay that price anymore. You don't have to carry the burden of everyone else's expectations on your back. You don't have to keep making yourself easier to swallow. You're allowed to want more, to take up space, to become the person you've been keeping on hold. And you start reclaiming that freedom in the smallest, simplest moments. Moments that seem insignificant, but shape everything you become. Every time you say, "I don't know," when you do know, you train yourself to doubt your own clarity. Every time you say, "Maybe," when your heart is screaming no, you fracture your integrity, piece by piece. And every time you apologize for needing, for speaking, for existing, when there's nothing to be sorry for, you teach yourself to see your own presence as a problem. These words, these small choices, they're not harmless. They're the language of weakness disguised as politeness. They're the silent scripts that keep you bound to who you've always been, instead of who you're meant to become. So stop. Stop giving your power away in conversations that don't deserve it. Stop shrinking your voice so others can avoid the discomfort of growth. Speak with certainty, even if your voice shakes at first. Move with intention, even when you're afraid of who might notice. Sit, stand, and walk like someone who knows, without hesitation, that they have every right to be here, to take up space, to leave an impression. Because you do. You always have. And the sooner you act like it, the sooner you'll feel the shift inside you, the quiet, unshakable knowing that you no longer need permission to live fully, fiercely, and unapologetically. Because in the end, everything comes down to a single decision. Will you evolve into the person you were born to be, or will you keep living inside the comfortable lies that have kept you small? There's no middle ground, no safe space between courage and complacency. One path leads you forward, the other leaves you circling the same old patterns until the days blur together and you forget what you even wanted in the first place. And here's the thing about knowing better. Once you do, you can't unsee the truth. You can't unfeel the frustration of holding yourself back. You can't keep pretending that you don't crave something more than the hollow comfort of approval and routine. Now you know better. You know that strength doesn't come from hiding your voice or muting your instincts. You know that real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict, but from standing rooted in your own convictions. You know that purpose isn't something that drifts into your life when you've been good enough, quiet enough, or patient enough. It's something you declare, something you build, something you protect. The moment you choose to become someone you respect, someone who can look in the mirror without flinching, without wondering if they sold themselves short, that's the moment everything begins to shift. And it doesn't require you to be the loudest in the room or the flashiest face in the crowd. It just requires you to be real. Because authenticity carries a weight that cheap imitation never can. And guarding your truth, honoring your own standard, isn't optional. It's survival. Because your life, the one you were meant to live, depends on it. So if these words stirred something in you, if you feel that quiet fire rising beneath the surface, hold on to it. Let it remind you that you were never meant to live small. Comment below with the words, "I choose to stand tall," and share what this means to you. And when you're done, keep your momentum going by watching one of the videos on your screen right now. Thank you for being here, for being a part of Mosaic Mind.